Hi, welcome to my channel. I thought I'd do a video on old Irish myths and legends. I absolutely love Irish history, and old Irish folklore is such a huge part of it. You know, back in early Ireland, the source of entertainment was storytellers, and they would go around from village to village all around Ireland telling these stories that have survived thousands of years. So they're really, like, all of our ancestors would have heard these stories, and they're really part of our heritage. So the first story I'm going to do is The King with Horse's Ears, and this is a mythological fiction tale, but it's actually based on a real documented king that did live called Labhraidh Loingseach, and he lived in around the 6th century BC. And I'm going to do the tale first, the fiction first, and then I'm going to go into who Labhraidh Loingseach really was, because I think that's even more interesting than the fiction. And by the way, if you like this content, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more. So The King with Horse's Ears. Labhraidh Loingseach was a king of Ireland who had a secret. He had horse's ears. And back then, any man with a blemish was considered not worthy to be a king, so he had to keep this secret from everyone. He grew his hair just long enough to cover the bottom of the ears, and he wore a crown just high enough to cover the top of the ears, but the only difficulty he had was getting a barber to cut his hair once a year, because that barber would realize his secret. So every year after the barber had finished cutting his hair, he would be put to death, so that the secret never got out. At first, barbers were absolutely thrilled to be invited to cut the king's hair. It was such an honor, and it would raise their reputation and status. But over time, people started realizing that when barbers went into the king's castle, they never came back. So then barbers started getting the fear, and you did not want to be called to cut the king's hair because it was pretty much a death sentence. So the king started having great difficulty in finding these barbers that would cut his hair. So one day he sent his men out and he said, "Find me a barber, no excuses, just bring one back to me." So the men went out and they found a young barber, and they ordered him to the castle. And they told him, "You are going to cut the king's hair, let's go." And his mother, hearing this, was absolutely distraught. She was terrified that her son would reach the same fate that every other barber had. So she followed them up to the castle and threw herself in front of the king and begged his mercy. She told him she was widowed and her son was all she had in the world, and she begged for the king to spare her only son's life. And the king took pity on her. So he asked her, "Well, can your son keep a secret?" And she said, "Yes, he will keep any secret." So he asked the barber, "Can you keep a secret?" And the barber said, "I vow, I swear on my life, I will keep a secret." So the king said, "Okay, if you keep the secret, then I will let you live. If the secret gets out, you will die." So the king and the barber retreated for the haircut, and the king removed his crown, and the barber saw that he had horse's ears. And he cut his hair, and as he was finishing up, the king warned him one more time. He said, "If this secret gets out, you will die, I will kill you." So the barber said, "I swear, I promise, I will never tell a soul what I've seen here today." So the barber went off on his way. And when news reached everyone that a barber had cut the king's hair and survived, everyone wanted to meet this barber. Everyone wanted to go and get their hair cut by him and ask him all these questions and find out what happened. And so the barber started feeling a huge amount of pressure. He was so terrified that this secret would get out and he would be put to death. So he just went into his room and he started getting physically sick, and it was just such a terrible burden on him. So he went to see a druid, and back then a druid was a figure that was kind of an all-encompassing. He was a therapist, he was a philosopher, he was a doctor, he was a teacher. So he went to the druid and he told the druid, "I have this terrible secret and I can't continue on with this. It's killing me." So the druid said, "Go deep into the forest and find a tree and tell your secret to that tree." So the barber followed the druid's advice and he went deep into the forest, and then he went deeper, and then he went deeper. He made sure no one was around, and then he found this beautiful tall willow tree, and he went up to the willow tree and leaned in and whispered, "The king has horse's ears." And straight away he felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, and he whispered it again, and he kept repeating it, and as he was repeating it, the stress and everything inside him was getting out, and he just felt such a relief. So he left his secret in this tree, and then he went home and he was healed. He was fine. He was able to live a normal life again. He had gotten this secret out. And then sometime later, a musician called Crafteen was walking through the forest, and his harp had broken. So he was looking for a tree to cut down to make wood for his new harp. And he came across the beautiful tall willow tree that the barber had told his secret to, and he cut it down and he made his new harp from that tree. And then the king held a big feast, and he invited all the other kings, he invited all the noble men and women, anyone who was anyone was going to be at this feast. So it was this big amazing party, and Crafteen was invited to play for the guests. So Crafteen set up, he got out his new harp, and as he was about to play, everyone would quieten down. You know, Crafteen was a very talented, very well-known musician, so everyone really wanted to hear him play. So it was silent in the room as Crafteen struck the first chord, and instead of it playing music, it shouted out, "The king has horse's ears!" And horror just appeared on the faces of all the guests. And Crafteen hit another chord, and again it called out, "The king has horse's ears!" And it kept calling this out. And the king was horrified. This secret that he had been holding in for so long was suddenly being revealed to everyone at his party. So he stood up and he removed his crown and he showed everyone his horse's ears. And his guests didn't respond as he had expected them to, or feared that they would. They instead respected him for having the guts to stand up and be truthful and be honest about his horse's ears. So then he felt such remorse for all the barbers that he had killed before, and he never hid his ears again. So that is the tale of the king with horse's ears. And as I said, it's based on a real king. The king's name is Labhraidh Loingseach, and I think the tale came maybe a few centuries after Labhraidh Loingseach ruled. But I'll tell you now about the true story of Labhraidh Loingseach, because I think that is a lot more interesting than the fiction. I mean, I say true, but this was, you know, over 2,000 years ago, so no one really knows the exact truth. So everything I'm saying is debatable. There are certain facts that are documented and written down, and then other things might just be hearsay, so, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. So the story begins with the High King of Ireland, Leary Lork. And his brother Covach was insanely jealous of Leary because Leary was the High King and Covach wanted that title. So one day Covach killed Leary and killed his son Ailill so that he could be the King of Ireland. Ailill also had a son, but Covach decided that the boy was young enough that he wasn't a real threat to him. So as a warning, he let the boy live, but he made him eat the hearts of his father and grandfather and eat a mouse with the tail. So he did this just to put fear into the boy. And while all this was happening, Ailill's wife and the young boy's mother, Anya, was being held back by guards, and there was nothing she could do to try and protect her husband or her young son from having to do these horrible things. This whole thing was so traumatic that the young boy never spoke again, and he was a mute until years later he was playing a hurling match and he got hit in the shin and he yelled out, "I'm hurt!" And everyone around him was shocked. They had never heard him speak before. These were the first words he had spoken since the traumatic event years earlier. So they all started saying, "He speaks, he speaks." And in Irish, that translates to Lowry. So that is how the boy got the name Lowry. As Lowry grew older, and now that he could speak again, his uncle Covach realized that he actually might be a threat. And his mother Anya was absolutely terrified that her son would have the same fate as his father and grandfather. So Lowry was sent to France. And in France, Lowry, because he was the nephew of the King of Ireland, he had a royal status, so he was welcomed into the French court and he was given an army and he became a great famed leader. And stories of his success reached Ireland, and the Irish people started hearing all about the great Labhraidh Loingseach and the amazing things he was doing over in France. And one of the people that heard all about Labhraidh Loingseach was the daughter of the King of Munster, and her name was Moira, and she just developed a huge crush on Labhraidh Loingseach. She thought he was amazing. So Moira wrote Lowry a love letter. Or the equivalent in those days. In those days, it was that she wrote a love song for him and got her musician Crafteen to travel to France and perform these love songs for Lowry. And in the songs, she wrote about how great he was and amazing he was, but she also wrote about how he should return to Ireland and rid the people of the tyrant, evil leader Covach, who was known as not a great leader. People didn't really like him. So Lowry absolutely loves the songs and he really wants to meet Moira, but more importantly, he's reminded how much he misses Ireland and the Irish people and how he is the rightful King of Ireland. So he decides to return and to fight for what is truly his. So then Lowry returns to Ireland, where he already has a good following. You know, the Irish people had heard about the great things he was doing, and they agreed that he was the rightful king of Ireland, so they supported him in his quest. So the first thing he did was claim the throne of Leinster, and he became the king of Leinster. But Leinster is just one part of Ireland, whereas the High King, which is Kuvok, oversaw all of Ireland. So he still had more to do. Meanwhile, he met Moira and they fell in love and they got married, and everything went great with that. So then came his next plan. He commissioned the building of a fort in Leinster, and this fort was made entirely of iron. When the building is finally complete, Lowry invites his uncle to a big feast. He says he just wants to make a truce and leave the past in the past. But Kuvok doesn't fall for it. Kuvok doesn't think he can really trust Lowry and refuses to go. But Lowry insists. He says, look, I'm happy being the king of Leinster, and I'm happy for you to remain the High King of Ireland. And Lowry says, listen, you can bring all your men, all your weapons, anything you need to feel safe, and bring it with you. I just want to move forward. So Kuvok agrees. And on the day of the feast, he arrives at the fort, and standing outside is Lowry and Lowry's mother, Anya. And Kuvok again gets the fear. He doesn't think he can trust Lowry. So he sends half of his men inside the fort to just check it out, make sure everything looks okay. So they go in and it's set up for a feast. There's food, there's drink, nothing looks wrong here. So they go back out and they tell Kuvok, it all looks clear, it all looks good. So Kuvok says to Lowry, okay, I'll go in if your mother goes in first. So Anya turns to Lowry and she knows what's coming. She gives him a reassuring smile and she marches straight into the fort, and so Kuvok follows her in and his men follow her in. And as soon as they're in there, the door slams shut, they're sealed in, and the building is set on fire. And because it's made of iron, it's a very painful, slow death. They're all roasted to death like an oven. And obviously Lowry is heartbroken that his mother went in, but she did it as a sacrifice for her son's honor and also to avenge the death of her husband. So Lowry Loingseach had killed his uncle Kuvok, and he took the place as the High King of Ireland. And he and Moira lived happily ever after. Well, not really. Kuvok's sons were not happy about their father being roasted to death, so they had something to say about that. But that's a story for another time. So that's it for my first Irish myth video. If you have any ideas or have any other legends that you want me to talk about, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye!